La vida es corta sin parar, mirar y de reír para celebrar. Cada momento hay que gozar, como si mañana no va a llegar.
Hola, hola. Welcome to Entre Tías y Amiguis, the podcast where we dive into the wild roller coaster ride of adulting. I'm your host, Adri Rodriguez, a queer Salvadorian native, a first-gen trailblazer, a multipreneur and licensed psychotherapist, here to share wisdom, stories, and real talk with my tías and amiguis and other incredible guests who inspire and uplift our community. I want to remind you that while I am a licensed psychotherapist, this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The discussions we have here are not substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Now let's dive into today's conversation and explore the journey of adulting together. Grab your cafecito, get comfy, and let's get started. Well, good morning, everyone, or afternoon, whenever the time is that you're listening. We're recording in the morning, so that's what's on my mind. I'm Adri Rodriguez, your host, here today with an awesome guest who's going to be talking to us on a very, very important topic that I think all of us either have like a very good experience with this topic or actually we're like very avoidant and like do not ever want to think about it. So we're bringing Stephanie Olano here today to talk to us about money. I always invite our guests to come in and introduce themselves, but also share part of those identities that potentially are shaping their lens, any background or experiences that also have been significant to take you into this journey to where we find you today. So let's welcome our guest, Stephanie. And why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Stephanie Olano. I use she, her pronouns. I am half Nagoya, half Selby, grew up in the Bay Area. And yeah, my day job is as a marriage and family therapist. But what I noticed in my private practice was a lot of my clients were just stuck and couldn't fathom this whole thing when it comes to money. And around the time this phrase or this concept was coming about, which is called financial trauma and anxiety. And given both of our backgrounds, we're like, oh, we know anxiety. We know trauma real well. Not to like humble brag, but, you know, in working in our communities, like that is a subject that we just have to, you know, be an expert in. But when it came to money, I was finding like, man, like I don't have the language for this. Like I don't have any research on this. I don't have a way to like help cope with this. So I had to like dig deep and figure out like, okay, what are the certifications? What are the classes? What kind of things can I show you to just help you navigate this a little bit more? So for the past 2 years, it's just what I've been focusing on. And that's how Awkward Money came about. I wanted to offer coaching services just to kind of help people figure out like, why am I so stuck when it comes to money? And generally it is, I describe it as more like a relationship. It's a relationship that wasn't really, you know, you didn't know how to talk to it. You don't know how to like build trust with it. You don't know how to like, you know, ask it for help or anyway. Like this is where you and I can kind of learn how to do that together.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about how money shows up in a lot of the work. I specialize, one of my specialties is in relationships, right? And so money always comes up and is one of those just kind of top 5 topics that people in relationships, particularly if you are sharing home finances, right? Like a lot of us are finding not only that our own money experiences, but the family of origin experiences, the system in that we grew up as immigrants, as children of immigrants, right? Like there has been a lot of ways in that money shows up or doesn't show up in healthy or sometimes in like very conflictual ways. So what was the inspiration? Was it finding that clients really needed this work? Was it like your personal journey and trying to figure it out and dismantle some of these messages? How did you bridge your lens as a therapist into the money coaching?
I would say it was a combination of both. The fact that the subject just kept coming up in a lot of my sessions with clients, and it was also coming up in my own personal life. So I went through on my own financial journey, and I love my coach, and we're still in talks today. And yeah, they're helping me navigate like the business side of things. But they just couldn't really, like our talks about trauma and anxiety, that was the piece that was just missing. Practical ways of handling my budget and really unpacking like, you know, what happened in the past. Like, yeah, that there was a foundational thing. There was like an introduction to that, but we didn't really like hone in on like, okay, what the trauma narrative just unfortunately couldn't happen because that's not what they're trained in, and even the literature that is out there when it comes to financial trauma, they're just missing certain key things when it comes to our mental health experience. So it was just like, okay, there needs to be a bridge. And knowing me, this is just a character flaw I have about myself. If I don't see it in the community, I'll just create it myself.
Or a gift.
Or a gift.
It sounds like a gift.
Yeah. Yeah. And I call it like an interesting character flaw because like I always am like, okay, the wheel doesn't exist. Like I always have to reinvent it. And a lot of people are always like, Steph, like there's just so much, like why couldn't you just settle with what's out there? And I'm like, it's not good enough. I could do it better. Or there's just something missing. And that's unfortunate. Like we have to figure out like what the missing pieces are and our people could benefit from it. So that was basically, it's a character flaw because it is a lot of work. It's a lot of like, am I doing this right? Am I second guessing myself? Am I like hubris in my own way of doing this? But along the way, like I've noticed like a lot of people in the community are responding to this. So yeah, that's why
I know when I saw you speak, and even though like when I saw you speak at Latina Presente, it was such a short, very introduction to you. And even then I was just like, oh, whoa, like this is something that I know that I need more training on, that I am constantly looking for more resources and also connecting with other providers, right, that have the knowledge that I have. So thank you for doing a little bit of the legwork, because I know that as therapists, we either find ourselves that we're like talking about just like the trauma part, right? And then it's just like, what providers do we connect our clients with, right? So that they can do more of the practical parts, the skill building, the tools, the kind of building the repertoire of like how you're going to do money. But I do think that as therapists, we do kind of have a little bit of a responsibility to make sure that we are bringing in the topic of money to the table, not because we're going to tell people how to manage their money, but to really understand what the roots are, like the narratives, what are the layers that are underneath, right? And so it sounds like you identified that there was a gap. You had been doing some work that took you into the skills and the tools, and now you have brought both of the both best sides of the both worlds, right, to come together and to be able to not only do the investigation and the deep dive, the building the self-awareness, but then also getting people the tools to be able to then take action that matches those values.
Yeah, because what I notice is like, and you and I talked about this when we first met. It's not that we don't know financial literacy. Like we read the books, like we go on YouTube, we know how to Google. Like our community knows how to find the answer on our own. But when it comes to understanding the trauma or understanding the mindset, that's the piece that's always been missing. And I don't think people in our community really know how to like search for that. Yes, there are resources, and obviously there are ways to like, learn it yourself. But generally, these are skills that you do have to learn in community. And unfortunately, our community, like we've always been taught, like we have to survive. We have to figure out like how to, get to the next step. The answers will come later type of thing. And when it comes to this takes a lot of not just focus, but just a lot of intention, and a lot of folks, like I just don't see that in a lot of literature that's out there right now.
Well, and I guess part of it would be when somebody is like ready to maybe talk about money, like they're ready to like just do it, right? Yeah. And because you maybe are in a lot of debt, or you're kind of in a position where it's creating conflict. If you're like in relationship therapy, for example, right? Like then we're talking about money because there's conflict of it. And what you're talking about here is to sort of think about it a little bit differently, where you are not only educating yourself, going in deep, but then also being practical. And that is going to take time. So I do want to kind of hear your definition about financial trauma. How are you defining financial trauma? And what are some of the signs or the behaviors that might indicate that someone is experiencing, or that might be that first point of awareness that somebody says, I should probably be talking to someone about this because I'm feeling stuck?
Yeah, for that, I go after the symptoms, especially like the somatic symptoms. So if you're having like panic attacks while opening bills, if you're getting stomach aches when thinking about your finances, if you are avoiding or just straight up like I'm ignoring certain calls from like the creditor or, someone who is trying to hit me up for money, like any type of avoidance when it comes to money. And there's like this discomfort, and to use my therapy jargon, if your nervous system is getting dysregulated, your nervous system is sensing like there's danger. We feel off. Like we don't know what's happening up there. So we're just going to make you go into fight or flight mode. But you're really just like sitting at your desk and trying to just open the bill.
There's no bear coming after you or saber-tooth tiger, but it feels that way. Like you are so overloaded every time that you are coming in the proximity of having to look at your finances. That makes sense. Relationally, probably a lot of fighting too, a lot of just like not being able to actually get to the task at hand because you are just getting in conflict just from talking about it, right? And so that even gets more complicated in a way because now you have two people's trauma stories or money difficulties or narratives to come in together and to build a relationship that then also has the transaction of money. How do you see cultural norms, generational trauma, intersectionality, like all those power dynamics of being, for example, for us being here BIPOC, being children of immigrants, right? Like, how do you see all those like areas impacting people as they are working towards being more open to investigate the financial trauma or the financial difficulties?
The key thing that I try to emphasize to people is like, possibly when your family immigrated to this country or where your family originated from, that does play a part. So my family comes from Central America. They immigrated here in the 80s. Guess what? They're probably not going to have the best, the same amount of trust in institutions like banks or the government as compared to Mexican Americans who have been here 3-4 generations already, Like I've heard stories like my grandmother, you literally used to hide money underneath the mattress. And I didn't understand why, or there's like a certain jacket that my grandfather would like hide the money in. And again, I didn't understand. Yeah, in the pocket, and I didn't understand why. So it's those little, I call it like little quirks like family has about money. It's unearthing that and figuring out like, wait, like historically, like what is happening, And if it sounds like there was a lot of secrecy in money, it sounds like there's a lot of hiding and a lot of like, we don't talk about that. That's the identity piece that I try to go after because there was a reason, but no one really had the time or the enough foresight to really be like, this is why we do this. Because again, when we're in survival mode, we're just acting on our better instincts. And, but when it comes to the generation after the person observing why we're doing this, it doesn't get translated to them.
So it is likely that if the listeners are kind of having that certain nervous system reaction right now, which is like, oh, we're just talking about money. And now I'm thinking about like what's happening is that in this moment, perhaps to take a little bit of a pit stop and a pause and take a breath and just wonder about where does your family come from and potentially what is that activation that you're feeling in this moment connected to, right? Because those quirks, I think they're very common, right? Like under the mattress or the little pocket in the bra, right? Like there is like all these ways that like money has been this thing potentially that has been a resource, right? To access, but also has been a source of conflict or an area of danger because people knew that you had money and you were talking about it, right? Like, right. I've heard these conversations like rich people will be like in the jacuzzi talking about money, right? Like they'd be doing business, like when they're like playing golf or whatever. Our families didn't come from those experiences. Perhaps like for our families of origin, talking about money actually put you in more danger because then now people knew that you had some resource and that would not be a safe conversation to have for sure.
Yeah. And given the history, like if you had two households that were desperate for looking for food, looking for resources, guess what? If my neighbor has a little something and they're not going to share, I'm going to make some desperate moves, but it's telling the body and the mind, like we're no longer in that, because again, I was not born in El Salvador, Nicaragua. I was born in the Bay Area, but I still had some of that concern of like, well, I have to save, I have to hoard, I have to hide my money. And it wasn't even anything that anyone told me. Like I would just hide my money in a shoebox, but it was just something I felt or believed like that was safer than putting it in a savings account. So it was really getting intentional with that. Like, what is this doing to me? Like why do I feel safe doing this? And is there a different way to do this? Not a better way? Cause sometimes like keeping a little money in your house, like that makes sense to you. I don't want to judge like that. I'd rather you earn interest on that. But if that is what feels safe and you need better access to that, fine, I leave it there. But how do we incorporate different ways so your money is making more money?
And what comes to mind for me is, for example, being like first gen or second gen, right? If you have got into a place where now you are thinking about not only about saving money or about covering your bases, but now you have a little extra to save, you have a little bit extra to grow, right? There is a possibility, a high possibility that depending on your family history, you also have not seen that model, right? That you have seen only the surviving, the having enough. And then it's just like, then we turn around, like as long as there is enough to pay for the bills, right? But then you're talking about sort of like what happens when you can pay the bills and you might have a little bit extra. And this is as a first gen or second gen, you may not have the role models to show you what do you do when you actually get out of like that just surviving paycheck to paycheck, and you may be able to start actually working with your money.
Yeah. And this is where that trauma and anxiety language comes into play. Like, what are the triggers? Like, why is it so triggering to know, like, you have a little extra? Like, what are the thoughts and feelings happening? You know, how do we get to a place where, you know, that's actually like a nice feeling, or it's actually like, okay, I'm safe. Because that's the key thing. A lot of the times when we're getting dysregulated, it's not that you're doing something wrong. It's just that your system is just not used to something, or just it's not used to this kind of safety. So we need to update the thinking, or we need to update the input a little bit more.
So you speak about reframing inherited money beliefs. What does that mean? How do we internalize them? So what are these inherited money beliefs that you're talking about?
Yeah. So again, a lot of the time, like my clients are unaware about their money beliefs. Because again, like no one is sitting down with us and saying, this is what we think of when it comes to money.
As a family, this is our
family, this is why it's important. This is what we look at it. And generally, it's either secrecy or money is inherently evil. You know, those are like the two main messages I hear. And I'm kind of sitting there like, well, okay, that can be true. Yeah. Money is also a tool. Money can help build things. Money can help alleviate or create resources and opportunities. Can that be like a different way of looking at it? But if my client's not quite there, it's like, all right, then what does feel right to you? Like, how has money shown up in your life? Is it really a bad thing? Or is it something that could lead into different pathways for you? So again, it's having that conversation and really finding out like, okay, I'm not in a place to know like money is inherently neutral, but at least I can get to a place where money is not trying to sabotage me. So I talk a lot about like money core values, and really figuring out like what is the discomfort when it comes to the concept of money.
What I was going to say, what I like about the approach that you're taking, and then also the benefit of your expertise as a therapist, as a licensed therapist, is that it could be, you go on YouTube, you go on TikTok, and you're, financial, how to budget, how to do this, how to do that, right? Like the how to. But if you're not understanding the root causes, then it is potentially likely that the how to either is going to convey that short-term change, right? They're going to get you really excited. But if it doesn't get onto that inner layer where the change becomes transformational, where you have done an investigation that allows you to say, okay, not only do I need the how, but this is why the how needs to happen this way. This is how the how is going to help me bridge, heal. And so it's borrowing that from the knowledge from the past to then be able to make decisions. And so I imagine that in your work as a coach and as a therapist, when this issues come up, then it's not only about throwing tools at you and telling you this is how you go do it, but it's really about tailoring to that individual, own history, own narratives, own challenges, and then be able to create that transformation. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, because I think what separates, folks who are just starting out in building this generational wealth and those who already have it, they know why the money is important. They have it built in. The money keeps the status quo. We keep it in the family. It's a legacy. It's just what we do. We are here. I remember this quote, like, the man who dies with the most toys wins. Like, there's just that mentality. But versus our community, again, trying to build a generational wealth, we're just wrapped with this idea of like, I just need to get to the next day. I just need to make sure my bills are paid. I need to make sure my family's okay. I need to make sure I'm not so far in the pit I can't get out of.
Yeah. And I mean, like, that takes us all the way back to colonization, right? Like, these are things even money stories and money traumas that don't even come just one generation or two generations ago, but we're talking about the person who has the most toys, right? Like, that literally is what happened with colonization. Who could collect people, things, and become like the biggest name, while people like us, many of our ancestors, right, we're in the receiving end of like, how do we survive this experience that is incredibly traumatic, that is unsafe, that is putting us just like, do I have food for the day, roof over our heads, right? Like, at the very, very basics. And so there is like a little bit of and maybe not even a little bit, there's an importance of naming that these generational stories are also collective, and they can tie all the way to historical trauma that had nothing to do directly with you or with like generation or two ago.
Yeah. And part of my coaching services as well is we have to mourn that. We do. That's why it's so frustrating. Like, we as cycle breakers, like, we are the ones that are accountable, and because we're aware that there's a different way. And yes, it is a lot to unpack, like, what the hell happened and why did this happen to me? And why am I the one that has to deal with the work? Why am I the one that has to process this? Not you, then who? First off, if not you, then it's going to be the generation after us. And do we really want them to deal with the sacrifice and the hard questions, you know? So it's a hard question, but it's like, you can continue doing what your family has shown you. It may have worked. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to say like my way is the best way. And yeah, you can continue going on this path. But if there's a slightly different path that will serve you slightly better, it will continue helping you on this journey and align with what you're trying to do, which is build that generational wealth. And it's not caught up in this insecurity, scary place that, you know, is really doing damage to your body and your psyche. Why not give it a chance? Why not give it a try? You know? And I always give my clients like autonomy. So if at any point, like, they say this is bullshit, like, they're allowed to say that and be like, yes, yeah, it is kind of bullshit, but
yeah,
it's your bullshit.
And in fact, like, people should be saying this is bullshit if they're working with any provider, and what is being advised, provided, or the direction that they're being guided is not meeting their needs or is not matching their values, right? Like, we want us providers to be able to be informed also by how does the client, how does the person working with us feel around the work that we're doing, because that is also going to allow us to tailor, right? Again, from like that perspective of the story, what fits for you and what doesn't, right? And then that you are like the person in control at the end of the day. I wanted to go back to the part of the mourning and the grief, because that's something that I very commonly see with a lot of first gens, a lot of adult children of immigrants, right? Like, there is this like sense of, I've been robbed of something. I wasn't given something, and it's very valid, right? And it's both like, what do you want to do about it? Right. But at the beginning, you might be feeling pretty stuck on the fact that you have to be the first person that perhaps is not going to be giving all the money to their parents, that is going to be filling in for the tia or the uncle or like the abuelita, right? Because you might have a different direction in which you want to take your money. And so there is grief and being first gen or being a third culture like individual, right? That is like having to say, this is all that I have learned, and it has been of service to my family up to this point because we survived, we made it. But now I have to make a decision about how do I do this a little bit different. And it is a lot of work to be the person who breaks the cycle. It can be a tough, just like heavy weight to carry, to acknowledge that you're being given the universe is giving you a task that nobody's prepared to help you with even, right? And so then there's individuals like you that can come in and provide that support, that you're not alone in this journey. But yeah, like, there is a good amount of mourning and grief.
Yeah, I go back to the idea of like, the thing that we're missing is, unfortunately, you aren't given a childhood. It's that simple. You had to grow up fast. You had to make very grown decisions starting from the age of 5, 8, 11, like whatever age. You were considered like the translator kid. or the parentified child. Like that is a very unfortunate reality. And we have to be able to express, like, you're allowed to say, like, I'm really mad about that. You know, I know why my parents, you could still say, like, I love my parents. I know why they had to do it. You know, I was the only one that could speak English in the household. I was the only one that somewhat understood what the IRS tax bill was going to say. Like, I was the only one. And if you're in a household or in a family where you didn't have a lot of resources, we did have to kind of make it up as we went along, you know, because again, we have that mistrust of outside sources, or, you know, our family has certain beliefs about charity or handouts. And that's why, like, families look to the children for solutions. And we have to be able to talk about that in a way that's like, how unfair.
Yeah, imagining being like the kiddo that's helping the parents pay the bills, or going to the bank, or having to do all these things, right? Like being parentified at such a young age will definitely imprint some of these money messages. And if your situation becomes different when you're an adult, right? Like your brain and your psyche is going to have a hard time weeding out what belongs to this time when it was really difficult to deal with money. And when I saw my mom, when I saw my parents, when I saw my grandma crying or being really stressed out or having to like figure out pennies from here to move over there, right? Like it is going to be very important to weed out that is not the experience that you're having in this moment when you're coming in to try to figure out what is your relationship with money, but then also what to do with it, right? Like it's going to be very different and we want to weed it out.
Yeah. And I actually tell my clients, like, if you want to have a budget just to go to like the toy store or like get something fun that you couldn't afford when you were that age, that's allowed. Like that's so like, cause I can't help but think like when we grow up too fast, we're still denying that inner kid, you know, that child in us that's like, but I want to play. You know, I want to have fun. I want to like go to the park and have an ice cream. Like I want to go to the Paletero Man and like get my favorite like coconut ice cream. Like that's what I want to do. But you're still telling me no, or we don't have the money. And that person is going to be a little rebellious or have a meltdown. You know, who wants that for a kid? You know, so we have to be able to honor that side. I know for me, like that's the teenager side in me. Like I sacrificed, I was with my little allowance, like I didn't spend on anything. But I got to a place where it was like, but I'm allowed to, I saved, I paid my bills. Like I can buy a little Pop Funko figure and like move on with my day, you know, because it makes me happy, you know, and nothing is going to get derailed. I'm not in trouble to do that. But I feel that way, you know?
Yeah. That is so important. Like the way that our inner child, right? It's not getting to also enjoy and benefit from being a kid and being able to have that restorative and repair experience as an adult that just wants like I'm thinking of like I have a frozen Funko Pop on my desk and it's just like, because I want to. Yeah. That doesn't go with my aesthetic, doesn't go with anything. It's just like simply, I love Elsa and I wanted a Funko Pop. And so I have it on my desk.
Yeah, exactly. And if it makes you happy, like it's fine. But I think for a lot of us, like that wasn't, yes, our families came here to give us more opportunities. And yes, they wanted us to, you know, hopefully be happier. But when we're just focusing on surviving and the practical side, there's not enough room to, you know, those behaviors to be happy or be content.
Right. So this journey is not only about being practical and learning how to do the things and like invest and do all that, but like really about reparenting and reconnecting to that inner child part of you that perhaps also was impacted by the way that the money presented itself at home.
Well, it's the big exercise of like, we're finding meaning in the struggle. The struggle in itself is not to live, you know, and I think a lot of us lose track of that. You know, we struggle. Hopefully we're in a place where we struggle for a little bit. So eventually we get to a better place, you know, but if we're not remembering that, or that's the piece that's missing, then we got to fill the gap somehow.
Yeah, you know? Definitely. How did the trauma of money certification? Because at the beginning you said that one of the realizations you had is that you needed to have more information. So you started looking at different avenues of becoming more educated on this. This is a certification that I know that I've looked into. And so what was the impact of your understanding of how financial trauma and those like not that knowledge that you already had as a therapist? Like how did that certification support you? Maybe perhaps as folks are therapists are looking for other avenues or other tools to, to learn to do this work a little bit better with their clients?
Yeah. So I thought initially like I would be a certified financial therapist, which I have. I sent in my application and they accepted me. So I have that little alphabet soup after my name. But I realized like the content was like, it wasn't really meant for, folks like us. Like they didn't talk about immigrants. They didn't talk about, generational trauma. They didn't talk, they probably did in like one slide, but it just wasn't like that informative. I think it was like a good starting point in like understanding, money beliefs and money stories. That was definitely the class I really enjoyed, but I felt like they could have gone deeper a little bit more. But also looking at their subjects or the research that they did, it was folks who were a little bit more in like affluent middle class to like upper class. And it was like, that doesn't really encompass all of my clients. So then I started to do more research, and it was actually my financial coach. She said it like very like matter of fact. She was just like, I can really like look at someone and really assess like what their money trauma is about. And I'm like, how do you do that? Like, I'm just curious. And she explained like, oh yeah, it's the money of trauma coaching curriculum. And I'm like, I need to know these people. I need to understand like what's going on. So they are based in Canada, which I was really weary about, but they really try their best to incorporate Indigenous practices, BIPOC providers, queer, they also have like queer coaches as well. And like, it was like one of the most diverse, staff I've ever seen talking about like money trauma. And I was like here for it. Cause again, it was just like, okay, these are my clients. These are the folks that represent like the kind of people I want to work with. And the subject matter was definitely enriching because it definitely did talk about the history of colonization and how capitalism does not benefit the worker. And we had those types of conversations,
So this is kind of where you go back to if you are working with someone, whether it's a therapist or a money coach, right? Like, I think this is kind of across the board. It is very important that these providers have an understanding of how the different layers of your identity and power dynamics in this world are showing up for you beyond just giving you tools, right? That it is like the humanistic understanding of both collective experiences, but also individual experiences are going to show up differently for different people.
Yeah, because I really appreciated like just how intentional they were around like the trauma and the somatic side of things. Like I think they really spoke with a lot of mental health professionals or really just looked at Indigenous practices and were like, I know because the main person who was teaching, they are Caucasian, but they were like, I understand like this is not my culture and my practices, but this is what we've been taught and this is what we've been shown. And they give credit where credit's due. And I really appreciated like just that little effort was like, okay, cool. Like, and then they gave me the source material if I wanted to do my own research as well.
So as you take folks through this journey of discovery, right? What is sort of the end goal that you see for people? Is it around financial empowerment? Is it around freedom? Is it around choice? What is kind of like the end goal that folks that work with you can imagine? And again, for every person, it's going to be a little bit different, but in terms of your values and the hopes that you have for your practice and the coaching programs and offerings that you have, what is kind of that ultimate goal that you're taking folks towards?
That's kind of like, my client will say like, what will it look like when I'm better? And they hate this answer every time, but it's like, it depends on you. It really does. Because I don't have the same window of tolerance as you do. Like that's just fact. But when we are able to have that same trigger, have that same stressor manifest in our lives, and we're not having a panic attack and we're not like in a place of like, oh, I need to stop everything. I need to fight or flight. I need to make a decision and I'm not able to see my options. That's progress to me.
So as a first step is like that regulation of the body.
Yeah, that's like the first piece, but it's also that confidence piece. Like, wait, I've been able to do this. Stephanie showed me the tools and and we got to a place where I could do this on my own. I always emphasize at the beginning of even with my private practice clients, I'm supposed to work myself out of a job. Like, you're not supposed to be calling me every time like a situation happens. You can, when you're regulated and you get to a place where you can do this on your own, that's when I know, like, okay, you're cool. Like, you're done.
Yeah, I think it's important for folks to understand, to know that this is not like a point A to point Z sort of journey, but it is going to have many pit stops along the way, and that the goals at the beginning may be just, or like the accomplishment at the beginning may just being able to open your bank account, being able to see the numbers.
Yeah.
Being able to get the bills paid, right? Like that there is different levels for different folks that are going to be different pit stops. And so perhaps I asked that question from the perspective of how to build that endurance for people to like imagine themselves diving into a road that is going to take a little while to get there, but that along the way, there's going to be small wins and bigger wins that they're going to amount to something very important to you because of the experiences that you have.
Or we get to a place where we just recognize the wins. Because part of my job is like really emphasizing, like, you did a thing. You did the thing that was like hard for you to do 3 months ago, and people like dismiss it or they overlook it. And I'm like, we should celebrate this. Like, go buy the pop figure, like go buy the comic book, like go get a paletero, like if that's what you want, like that these are important. You know? Yeah. I think we get so caught up in like, the action part of the cycle of change, that we're not looking at, wait, like there's all this preemptive stuff. There are all these steps before, and there's going to be steps after.
Yeah. And so we get used to seeing like the big win. I think that's part of just like the season of life that we're living with social media and like with like access to information, right? Before we have like access to social media, it might take a while to hear that another person had accomplished your goal. But nowadays, we all are bombarded with like what success is supposed to look like, what end goal is supposed to look like, that we may get discouraged along the way of recognizing that the small wins are still wins, and that the small wins are what amount and build up towards those larger goals that you may have.
Yeah. And that's what's going to reinforce this idea of like, I am financially confident, not competent, because we're competent. All of us are competent. Like, all of us do the work. All of us read the books. Like, I can't tell you how many times it's like, I read Psychology of Money. I read the Dave Ramsey, whatever. I listened to the podcast and I'm like, okay, cool. That's logically, you know. But here, this is kind of like ground zero. This is like, I don't know what's going on. Doesn't feel safe. I don't like it. We have to be able to have this and this work together.
The heart and the mind connection, because so much of trauma is also that disconnection of the mind and the body, the mind and the heart, right? And so being able to feel reconnected. Great, amazing work that you're doing. What kind of last words do you want to leave us with with our audience as they embark, or even just hearing this episode, they're like, okay, there's more here to dig and there's more here to do. What are some of the last thoughts that you would like folks to take from the invitation to start looking at this, not only from the practical side, but also the heart and the body side?
Just that this is an invitation. Like, there is no right way to do this, you know, but if there is a way that you're just curious or just kind of wanting to, you know, test out or figure out, like, again, there are tons of resources out there. It's not just me. Like, a lot of us are out here doing the work, you know, and it's based on your style. You know, if you find like my ways like too blunt or maybe too harsh, okay, there are other folks who are probably like have a softer hand. I get that. I don't take it personally, you know, but understand, like, it is an invitation, you know, and it's your right. You have you have autonomy to figure out like what works best for you. You know, it's the same thing I say whenever I'm doing like a guided meditation. This is an invitation. If you want to refuse or you kind of want to like participate in your own way, that's okay. You know, as long as we're being respectful and not disruptive, and, you know, someone else can gain something out of it and you gain something out of it, that is a win for me.
And what about last words for providers? Because I know some of us that are listening to this episode likely are some therapists or other folks that are working in the helping professions. And so how any advice or any words for those of us who are working with people who are bringing up money and that perhaps we are not feeling ready to talk about this topic with them? Any last words for them?
Just that it's okay if you feel a little off when talking to money with your clients, because it just wasn't taught in grad school. Like, this is something I had enough privilege and enough time to like figure out like, where is the knowledge? Like when can I study this type of thing? Just know, like, you are not a bad therapist. You are not like a bad provider. It's just one of those things that I wish grad school spent more time on. But this is just where we're at. And we do have to seek that knowledge elsewhere for right now.
And then we have folks like you who can help us also build the bridge. And I'm sure that you probably are available for consultation as well for other clinicians to not only send clients your way, but sometimes to just like strengthen our own knowledge as we're working with clients and this topic comes.
Yeah, because I love working with those therapists, especially those who are starting out or just, they're in the first couple of years of their practicum years. Like, I think if someone had just spoken to me a little bit more about like, I'm dealing with that insecurity, I don't know if I'm good enough, you most likely are. You're just missing a few key foundational knowledge pieces, and that's all you need.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy that we have more folks like you, Stephanie, doing this work, because I know that is a huge need. And so on the show notes, we'll put all the links to get in touch with Stephanie, to be able to work with them and to, get started in this journey of like investigating the narratives, but also building some tools so that you can start feeling the wins along the way.
Yes.
So thank you so much for coming today into Entre Tías y Amiguis. It's such a pleasure. And for all of you folks, thank you for listening. Until next week. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your tías and amiguis. Your support helps us reach more people and continue these important conversations. And don't forget to follow us on social media and stay connected. Until next time, remember to take care of yourself, embrace your journey, and keep living life with heart, vision, and creativity.